Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Okay, now we enter chapter 2 under the topic of analog modulation. This chapter consists of amplitude modulation in part A, part 1, and frequency modulation in part 2 or 2.2. In amplitude modulation, we will cover introduction, principles of AM transmission technique, comparison of single sideband transmission to conventional AM. For frequency modulation, we will cover introduction, frequency modulation, the theory, commercial broadcast band FM, and some discussion on comparison between FM and PM, phase modulation, and frequency modulation versus amplitude modulation. Okay, lesson outcomes from this chapter: define AM concepts. Number 2, calculate the AM voltage distribution, modulation index, voltage, power distributions. And third, calculate and draw AM envelope in time domain and frequency domain, as well as the bandwidth of AM. Okay, this is a general classification in communication system. So in general, communication system can be divided into two, which is continuous wave or analog and digital wave. In continuous wave, we have the division, we divided into two, which is amplitude modulation AM and angle modulation. And in angle modulation, we have two class, which is FM frequency modulation, and another one is PM phase modulation. So this kind of modulations, phase modulation, frequency modulation, amplitude modulation, are all fall into the classification of continuous wave, aka analog. On the other hand, we have another one, which is digital wave, which have digital modulation, namely analog pulse modulation and also digital pulse modulation. We will discuss all these type of modulation further in the next chapter of this subject. Continuous wave modulation. Sinusoidal carrier modulation discussed above is called continuous wave or CW. CW modulation is used by most long distance communication. Okay, there are two types of CW modulation, which is amplitude modulation and angle modulation. The angle modulation can be further subdivided into frequency modulation FM and phase modulation PM. In this technique, the amplitude, frequency or phase of the carrier is changed, is altered, is modulated as according to modulating signal amplitude. So now we will discuss further about amplitude modulation. So let's see the general process of modulation. So modulation process basically is a process where it has two input and one output. So this block diagram shows general process of modulation. What is the input? The input is the carrier signal and baseband signal, and the process will result in modulated signal as the output of the modulation process. Modulation. Whenever the message or information signal rides over the carrier, it is called modulation. Consider, for example, sinusoid carrier signal. The message signal can ride over this carrier sine wave in three ways. It can ride over amplitude, so we call it amplitude modulation. It can ride over the phase of the carrier, or we call it phase modulation, and it can ride over the frequency carrier, so we call it frequency modulation. So this is the sine wave signal of carrier signal, modulating signal or modulating wave, and this is the modulated signal. So we can see here there are little bit different in terms of the signal. This is the carrier signal. It has a very high frequency compared to modulating signal. So modulating signal has very low frequency compared to the carrier signal. So in the modulation process, this modulating signal and carrier signal combine together to produce or to become modulated signal. This is called envelope of amplitude modulated signal. So we have a new signal which is having the same frequency of the carrier, but the amplitude changes following the amplitude of the modulating signal. Modulation is the process of placing the message signal which is low frequency over some carrier signal which is high frequency to make it suitable for transmission over long distance. The carrier signal is basically higher frequency than that of message. So the carrier will have higher frequency compared to the frequency of the message or the modulating signal, and it has the ability to travel over long distance. So we will discuss further about this modulation in the next part of this chapter. Demodulation, on the other hand, the modulated carrier signal is transmitted by the transmitter. The receiver receives this signal, separates the message signal from the modulated carrier. This process is exactly opposite of modulation at the transmitter. So the demodulation is the process of separating message signal from the modulated carrier signal. So we want to separate the modulating signal from the envelope AM modulated carrier signal. So why we need to modulate the signal? So this is the reason why we need to modulate. Normally signal are not in the form that suitable for transmission. So it need to be modulated in order to transmit. Modulation also needs because it has to do with bandwidth requirement, and also signal multiplexing, and also we need to prevent noise, interference, attenuation, and so on, to disturb with the signal or with the information. So this is among the reasons why we need to modulate the signal. In general, there are many types of modulations. So these modulations also can be divided into analog, digital. There are analog types of modulation, which is AM, amplitude modulation, frequency modulation, and phase modulation. So we are discussing now AM modulation. We also have digital type of modulation, which is PCM, pass code modulation, digital modulation. And another type is called keying modulations, which is ASK, FSK, and PSK. ASK is amplitude shift keying, FSK is frequency shift keying, and PSK is phase shift keying. So as we know, we have the parameter of the signal. We have amplitude of the signal, sine wave. We have the frequency of the sine wave, and we have the phase of the sine wave of the signal. So by changing these parameters, we will have different type of modulation. Changing amplitude produces amplitude modulation signal. Changing frequency produces frequency modulation signal. Changing the phase produces phase modulation signal. This is AM, this is PM, and this is FM, then this is PM. That's all. Thank you very much. We will continue part 2. That's all. Thank you. Bye.